Welcome to the Know It's Some podcast, bringing you the widest variety of conversational interviews for a well-rounded perspective on life. Because while it's true, nobody likes a know-it-all, it's also good to know it's some. Here's your host, Steve Platt.
That's right, folks. Welcome back to another great episode of the Know It's Some podcast. I'm your host, Steve Platt. Last week, I told you guys we were on 14 different podcast listening platforms. Well, that list has grown. We are now on iHeartRadio and Pandora, bringing us to a total of 16 different podcast listening platforms, meaning that the Know It Some podcast is available wherever you get your podcast. This week's guest is a very funny comedian, great guy. His name's Kevin McCaffrey, stand-up comic, comedy writer. The resume is long. He's been on The Late Show with David Letterman. He has been on True TV's World's Dumbest. He has a comedy album out now that's very funny. It's called Nice and Drunk. You're going to want to check that out. But we had a great conversation. I found it to be pretty fun. I think you guys will like it. We go into a lot of his journey as a comedian, but we just had a lot of laughs along the way. This is probably one of my favorite episodes so far, if not my favorite. So I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I did. But the guy's just a great Twitter follow as well if you're on social media. Really funny Twitter account. So check it out. Here we go. Episode 12, Kevin McCaffrey. Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
Welcome to the Know It Some podcast. Thanks for being here.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Steve.
I really appreciate it. I think like any sane person, I love stand-up comedy. It's kind of like saying you love music. Like,
Sure.
Everybody loves stand-up. But you are one of the funniest folks that I've seen. You're an amazing Twitter follow for folks
thank you.
out there. And I just had to have you on the podcast to kind of learn how you got into this. How long have you been doing stand-up?
Been doing stand-up in terms of like for a job, I would say since 2008. I did my first open mic in 2006, and then I got a writing job and sort of didn't do anything for a little bit. And then I would say I started like doing open mics on a consistent basis and starting to actually work at it in 2007. So, I think it's like 13-ish, 14 years. It's sort of, I do feel like every stand-up who does it professionally, you sort of, once you're 5 or 6 years in, you feel like you're just that forever, like it's when I say the number out loud, it sounds longer than it feels like, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it shows. You have, presence up there. You feel, or it looks like you feel at home up there. You're very comfortable on stage. When did you know that you were, going to be getting into comedy? When you were a kid, were you class clown kind of thing, or was this something that developed over time?
That's a topic I was hearing. I was just hearing Conan and Seth Meyers talk about this in terms of whether funny people who become funny professionally, were they the class clown or like the quieter joke in the back of the room type? And
Mm-hmm.
I think I went through phases of both, kind of. But I think my clown era was more short lived. I think maybe fourth, fifth, sixth grade. I was fairly hyperactive. And certainly, I had to be corralled a little bit by the teacher. But after that, I feel like it's sort of how I am socially now too, where when it's time to, I do like when it's my time, I enjoy being paid attention to, obviously. But I also think I'm not a particularly like on all the time type. I think I'm more of a, I appear to be more of a human being that could fit into some other settings than I think some of my comedian friends are. So I think like in terms of a job, the first thing I wanted to do was play in the NBA. That didn't happen. And then
You're that close.
Yeah, and I'm starting to feel like it might not at this point. But after that, it really, I was a huge Letterman and Conan fan from a weirdly young age. And that was the only other thing I wanted to do. So that's like, I did a radio show in high school that I ended up spending a ton of time on, and then went to college specifically to do like a TV show there, and go from there.
I'm right with you, especially on the Conan thing. I would stay up to an ungodly hour during school years. Really,
yeah.
Way too young to be doing it.
Absolutely, that was your guy. You're a Conan guy.
Huge Conan guy. He had Abe Vigoda do bits.
Oh, of course.
I don't know. It was just an amazing show.
I did not know who Abe Vigoda was in any other way. When that started, I did not know.
He's a legend.
Yeah, he is a legend. He's been in a million things. I mean, he's had a rough go in The Godfather, and obviously has been in a million things. But to me, that dude, that's sort of the epitome of a guy who was just like a person I know from Conan. We make jokes about how old he is. He comes on. We don't really do anything with him. Right. And
I'm convinced he's still kicking. He's still doing bits somewhere. I don't care what anybody says.
I'll believe it. Yeah.
But you were a huge Letterman fan, you said. So how did you get the job on Letterman? Because you worked for the show for a little bit, right?
I did. So in college, I did this. This is very much by happenstance that I went to the same college as Letterman did. So I went to Ball State. Went to Ball State University in Indiana, and when I did that, I remember when I got, when you're in high school, you start getting flyers from all the different colleges and stuff. And I remember getting a Ball State flyer and being like, haha, that would be funny, but I won't, because it almost felt like I was such a Dave fan that I knew he went there, and I thought I'm not going to do that. And then I grew up in the Chicago area, and Ball State's pretty close to there. It was cheaper than UCLA and Syracuse. And I was looking at TV places with particularly good TV programs, and Ball State sort of just ended up being the best choice for that. So I went, and the most significant thing for me for all this, I think, was a TV show I did in college. I basically went, there was a show that was not a full comedy show, but they had a desk and a host. It was so bad that there were a couple of good people on it, but they had literally one comedic segment that they called officially the bit o' humor, which is disgusting. And I was like, okay, there's a host here. I'm going to take that over. So I did, and made it into basically like a hybrid Letterman SNL format of a show that I hosted for 4 years. That's how I met my wife. That's how I met, a lot of my best friends that all moved out to New York together. And my wife is 1 year ahead of me.
Right.
And she ended up getting an internship at Letterman first. And that made the Letterman, the people who were in charge of interviewing and then choosing interns, that made them look at our group, our TV program. And then 2 semesters later, I got in as a writer's intern there.
So we can thank your wife. She
absolutely
must be the funnier one of the two, I'm sure.
She is, honest to God, I'm relatively biased, obviously, but and we've been together for 18 years at this point, but I don't know a better comedy writer. She ended up writing jokes for Letterman as well. She's written for a million things. We've worked on several shows together. Currently, she's a writer and does voices at Howard Stern. I lucked out to have a really weirdly talented group of people at Ball State doing this thing when I was there, and I think that helped all of us. But my wife Jamie definitely was like the Jackie Robinson of getting us in anywhere. She was the first one who got hired somewhere, and then they that sort of led to the chain of events that followed.
Well, so working for one of your childhood idols, and he's a legend. Not
absolutely,
just your idol, but just an absolute legend.
Yeah.
What was the culture like on the show? Because in the writers' room and with the technical staff, what's the culture working for a guy like David Letterman?
It was. I think there's a chance I almost even gave it too much respect coming into it, and that's to say nothing negative about it. That's just I had it on such a pedestal in my head, and it turns out, and it's a good lesson when you're younger to just know anywhere you go, the people working there are human beings. You know, they're not, no matter how high up you think it is, it's
still a bunch of people in a room pitching jokes.
Absolutely. And I think like something I was surprised by was that these people were funnier than I anticipated. The writers themselves, how funny they were just talking and goofing around and stuff was incredible, and getting to, you know, be their intern was awesome. And I ended up getting to write top 10 jokes for the list under the table for a bit, and then got hired to write monologue jokes on a freelance basis when the internship was over. But I think one thing that was different culturally on Letterman than it was, from what I understand from friends who've worked on other late night shows, is partially because Dave was around for so long. There's a group of people who specifically wanted to work for him, and many of them didn't even want to necessarily work in television otherwise. So there's sort of, it felt like there's like a gene or a sensibility that sort of tied the people who worked there together in an interesting way, in terms of what they thought was cool, what in terms of their sense of humor. And I mean, and now I live in New York, and have since I graduated college. But a lot of our best friends are still people who we worked with in those first couple years at Letterman, and it's just like there is a distinct, friendly, and I think like not taking showbiz too seriously vibe there that I think is different from a lot of the other shows.
Gotcha. I didn't realize you were in New York, because I'd seen some bits that you had done at Zany's in Chicago. I knew you were a Chicago guy, Cubbies fan, and the whole deal. And so I thought Zany's was your home club. So where do you work out material over there in New York City? There's a number of clubs there.
Oh yeah, I mean, and in New York, there are clubs that are great. Obviously, like, you know, the Comedy Cellar, if you were to name the top clubs on earth, is right there. It's probably the best showcase club on earth. But as far as stuff in New York, and where I like to perform here, a lot of my favorite shows are just, you know, one-off bar shows, or at venues that are doing that aren't even comedy most of the week, but have like one night where they in the showroom it's this way. And there's a club called Union Hall, which is sort of more of an, I guess you would say, an alt venue, you know, that myself and a couple friends of mine ran a show at for years. There's a venue called Caveat that we do a monthly show at that I really love too. So I think one thing that's nice about New York, in that a lot of other cities don't have the same luxury of, is the amount of sort of indie and one-off venues like that. And that's the hundreds of the thousands of shows I've done here in New York since I started. It's a high percentage of them are that, you know.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's pretty much what I stuck to. When I was in my late teens, early 20s, I tried my hand at stand-up comedy. And
where at?
So I was doing a bunch of bringer shows. I was performing mostly in Florida and Texas. I really didn't get above doing bringer shows for very long. And it fizzled out pretty quickly. I performed at the old Miami Improv back.
Oh, sure.
You know, before it moved to Doral, when it was down in Coconut Grove, because I'm originally from Miami. And then I did a bunch of stuff in college towns like Gainesville and Tallahassee, and then in Texas, in the San Antonio area. But
I mean, that's a pretty good variety of spots, though.
Yeah, it was very short lived for a reason. I I think in order to succeed, you really have to work at it, and you have to be willing to bomb and be able to overcome that and not take it personally, and realize, okay, I just got to restructure things or change how I'm delivering it. And I don't know that I had the work ethic that it takes to be a comic. I think it looks effortless to those who have not done it. And I think there are a lot of people whose friends tell them that they're funny, that are like, oh, you know, I can get on stage and I can do 10 minutes or whatever. But really, I mean, every minute that you work out, a lot goes into it.
Absolutely. And I think even either beyond or in addition to the work ethic thing, there is a level of delusion necessary where you have to, it's nice, it's nice to be aware of how well you're doing. There are comics who think they've never authentically bombed, and
Right.
there are, and there's fewer who think they've never quite killed. And the reality is somewhere in the middle of that usually.
Right.
But I do think it is such a non-linear job. It's not like you intern at stand up and then you do this and then you do that and now you're a professional and that's it. It's so non-linear, and you don't get paid usually for so long,
Right.
that it requires a level of delusion where you always have to think you're a little better than you are, otherwise you would stop, because
Right.
if you had an authentic view of where you are at any step, the right choice, unless you're Eddie Murphy at 18, is like everyone else should have quit, like in a reasonable sense. And then, if you are kind of good, and then eventually the things start happening, but like it takes a while. And whenever people come up after a show, when I'm standing at the door and saying bye and thanks for coming or whatever, you'll frequently get people who ask about like how to get started in stand-up. People want to, and I always say, like, if you think you might want to, for sure do it once.
Yeah.
Because you can, and there's no real downside, and it's an interesting thing to have done once. Yeah, exactly.
I Florida's not got a great comedy scene.
Right. It's a weird one. Imagine that.
It's
but yeah,
definitely a strange one. I live about 45 minutes south of Tampa, and so we got a club here in Sarasota, McCurdy's, and then we got some clubs up in Tampa and Orlando. And I might do it for fun, but my wife's gonna keep me away from that. I'll tell you that right now.
Sure.
and God bless her for it.
Yeah.
But to add to your delusion, you are. I just got to tell you, you're extremely funny. You're the second funniest person whose name starts with Kevin McCa. Right after Kevin McAllister.
Sure.
And then right after that, there's.
And I've done it for longer than McAllister. I'll say, McAllister has a really hot 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And he has, and really, his sophomore album was pretty good too.
It's a lot of crowd work.
Yeah, it is a lot of crowd. It's a lot of prop stuff, man. It is. We do different things,
Yep. I never really thought of him as a prop comic, but yeah, you got him and Carrot Top, and
yeah.
And those are the two top prop comics in my book.
Big rivals, those two. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So you ended up doing a set. I want to say like 8 years ago on Letterman, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
It was it was a legitimate bucket list thing, and at that point he hadn't announced that he was going to be leaving yet. So, but you knew how old he was. How the show had been around longer than I'd been alive.
Right.
Dave had been doing late night longer than I'd been alive. So we all knew that it's the kind of thing where if you did want to do it, and you were my age at the time, I did it when I was 31. You know that it's not going to be around forever. So. There was a booker for the show who's a nice guy, but just like didn't want to book me, in part because of my connections to the show. And then when he no longer had that job, different bookers came in, and they and I got contacted, and they were like, "Would you want to audition?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would like to do Letterman if that's possible." Sure. So I ended up doing 2 auditions, and getting booked to do it. And yeah, it was something where if it didn't happen, I would have regretted it not happening forever. And going back, it was such a nice thing it was very storybook in that it was so many people on the staff were happy that I was doing it, because they remember, it
was like the movie Rudy. Everybody's cheering on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was Rudy, except I was putting up numbers in practice.
Yeah.
But it was Rudy-esque. It was, in that, because the person who officially greeted me at the door, they send a car service for you, and I'm like, I know the subway to get there. I don't need this, but if you're doing the whole process, whatever. But the person who greets me at the door to take me to the green room was at my wedding. You know what I mean? This was, and it's my friend Megan, who's just like, Mr. McCaffrey, come this way. And there were so many people there and of the jobs I had there. So I worked as an intern, then I was a page for 9 months. Or so.
You and Regis Philbin have both been pages there.
We've been following each other throughout history.
Yeah.
And
2 years apart.
Yeah, a couple. And then I was the music assistant for a year, which meant I worked with the Paul Schaefer and the CBS Orchestra.
Oh,
So if
jeez.
you watch like video of me walking out, the band is going nuts because
Mhm.
they know me, and I mean I hadn't worked there in that capacity for 7 years, I think, but they were very excited for me. So I mean that was beautiful. And my green room list was my wife and my three other best friends who I lived with when we all moved out here. We all did the college show together.
Mhm.
And then you go up, and then I was obviously excited to be there, and I wasn't nervous, but I didn't want to like be celebrating anything
Right.
until it had happened and gone well. So
No, I hear you.
so I did that. And the thing you notice once you get out there, and I've heard it isn't like this on every late show, but it was just the easiest audience. Like you're getting you're getting applause breaks on setups and stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's like that was not the joke part yet, and you're having to pause. And the first laugh I heard, it was a joke about like hating my family, not the whole thing, but a part, but
You have the right to.
absolutely. Yeah, they were right. There's a couple specifics, but there was a joke about that, and the first laugh I heard was Dave to my left, and so
Mhm.
that's a very like comforting. It's like, all
Yeah.
right, well, screw it. From here, I think I'm good. And then and I'm glad I had the presence of mind knowing like, okay, I have 2 bits left. And really, I was in the moment very much trying to just like hang out
Mhm.
here, like hang out here a bit and enjoy it, because
Soak it in.
it's a rare thing. And it was that was a blast.
So you and I grew up in a different era. Because right now, everything's streaming. We have social media. We have these powerful computers in our pocket, right? But
Hmm.
comedy back then, I mean, you hit it big if you pulled a Roseanne or a Seinfeld or a Ray Romano, right?
Hmm.
Got on TV. Yeah, it was either that or auditioning for something like SNL or Mad TV.
Hmm.
Did you have any of those dreams of being in television, either as an actor or doing improv work? Did that ever cross your bucket list, per se?
Not as an actor. Like I've done acting. I've been in stuff. It's
Right.
but it's not, I wouldn't consider myself an actor, and I never really was looking to particularly do that. I feel
Hmm.
like late night stuff is really what appealed to me most, because I prefer, I don't really play a character on stage. I
It's just you.
yeah, it's me, and I say things that I actually think, and
Hmm.
like that kind of thing.
Which can get
So
you in trouble.
yeah, yeah, sure. And then, but if you actually believe it, it's like, who cares,
Yeah.
So I think that's always how I've felt. And I think a weakness of mine as a stand-up is I don't particularly like doing the same stuff over and over. I like
Hmm.
moving on relatively quickly, and the excitement's more in having something new hit. So late
Right.
night specifically, where you're reloading all the time, was what stood out more to me. And I think as far as improv is concerned, I did UCB, like Upright Citizens Brigade stuff
Oh, okay.
here in New York for a bit, and that's fine. And like the people who do that great are really, I very
Yeah.
much enjoy. But I think my my mentality and just my vibe was, I tend to think improv people, before a show, their
Hmm.
vibe is always like, this is going to be great, this is going to be fun. But stand-up's vibe is like, ugh, we'll see when it's over. I'll tell you when. We'll, it's more like, I'll let you know if it went well after this.
Hmm.
So I think my vibe was just always more that, and
I
I enjoy improv, but for me, it was always going to be more, I think, more of a thing based around stand up, performing as myself, which, I mean, the people you just named, Seinfeld, Roseanne, and Romano, those are all people who basically just did themselves on a sitcom, and I would
Yeah.
love that too. But um,
And
yeah,
Romano's a Letterman product. I mean,
absolutely. He was like the last one who had that particular career path happen. I
hmm
think, where you go on, you get a late night spot, you kill the late night spot, then the host production company starts a show with you, and then you do your own sitcom.
which is bonkers to me because I mean, he had no acting experience whatsoever.
Yeah.
And out of all the scenarios that could have happened, the one that it turned out where he was almost a natural. I mean, the show's
Absolutely.
hilarious.
Yeah, it was
That
great.
was like 1 out of 100 scenarios. That thing could have bombed so hard.
Yeah.
It's incredible how you can go from stand up to acting. I think you did the right thing in not trying to pursue the acting route. Because it's I don't know. I mean, like you said, it's not for everybody. And
Yeah, and it's like you can, fun thing about acting, hot tip is it's pretend. So anyone, and especially when they do if it's not live, if it's not theater stuff, you can do enough takes to just make you can get a good one. But I think it's.
But is it fun?
Right, and really it's just a matter of where you want to put your time. Like you say, there used to be more of a linear path to these things, and now. You don't know how it's going to hit. It could be through podcasting. It could be through the live stuff, and curating your own like small but intense audience is something that I think happens more now than it used to,
Oh yeah. And with improv, if you don't have the right cast around you and you got somebody that wants to make it all about them and isn't all about playing off of each other with the yes and, it can really kill the vibe.
And I think for me personally, like I came from a sports background for a while, and I think this is which is not the most common thing within stand-ups, but like I more than a teammate bringing you down, I never wanted to be the one who sucked in a scene and then made it bad for other people. Like I can take me on my own if it doesn't go well a little better, but the feeling of like, oh, I ruined that for everybody sucks. And I remember talking to like a guy who was like coaching our improv team, and after a scene I was just like pissed off because I didn't think I was good. And he's like, that's not even how we think here. And I'm like, well, it is how I think. It is like, I do judge myself scene to scene. I know that's not helpful for improv, but yeah.
Well, try doing it for charity. My one and only experience with improv was a charity event. I started doing stand-up when I was a sophomore in high school, and somebody had seen me perform a couple times. And there was a charity event for a group called Castaways Against Cancer. And this group paddles kayaks from Miami to Key West every year, and they raise money for cancer research, right?
Yeah.
And so anyhow, they had an improv night, a bunch of comedians there, and some were stand-up, some were improv related. Everybody did great except for me, and I bombed for charity, and I felt horrible. And it was the one and only experience that I had with improv.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, I always, take your own analysis with a grain of salt. Not that I'm doubting it felt worse or anything, but also I think people might be surprising to other people who haven't been in a scenario like that is so frequently benefit shows and charity shows are the absolute worst because a lot of the people there are like, I already did my nice thing. Now I can be a D-bag and it doesn't matter. I'm still a good person. And they have been some of the worst audiences I've ever had have been benefit shows. So that does not surprise me. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that you never know where your audience can come from. You recently were exposed to a number of folks that had not seen your comedy before because of some videos regarding your cousin that went viral. I've tried so hard to keep this podcast non-political, but
no, you don't have to. You get,
yeah. But some really, really funny stuff. I don't care what side of the political aisle you are on. Just really, really funny stuff about, I guess, a third or fourth cousin of yours.
I think it's first cousin twice removed. Yeah, but go ahead.
Roger that. So your grandma's cousin, right?
Yes, it's my grandma's first cousin.
And who would that be?
It's Mike Pence. So my grandma's name before she got married was Joan Pence, and she grew up with the Pences, and even like my mom my mom and her 4 sisters, would vacation with these people, like occasionally growing up, there's photos of all my, my aunts hanging out with Mike at, Lake Geneva in Wisconsin. And I've definitely
oh boy.
So it's the kind of thing where I've known about him for a long time, and I talk about that in the stand-up. And as you said, the point of when I am doing political stuff, I'm not I don't think I'm hesitant to put forward how I feel, but when I'm doing it in stand-up, the point is also that I think it's funny regardless. And when I am talking about it, I'm basing it, in a specific part of the bit, which blew up on TikTok, especially this year, is about me talking about facts, legit actual facts about Mike Pence that I find to be humorous. So
I don't see how you can't find it funny. It's hilarious. People need to check it out. It's also on YouTube as well. I know you have a hard out. So
in 13 minutes, basically, I have the next thing. But
well, there's a lot that I'd like to let you talk about and promote here, because I know you have a stand-up special out. You have a few podcasts that you do. So could you just tell me a little bit about what you got going on right now?
Sure. I do a weekly show on Sirius XM, channel 99, 4 p.m. with a very funny comic named Sean Donnelly, who is equally as Irish as I am, and we are.
It's about time we have some white male comedians.
Some straight white, Irish. We finally got it. We're representing, but we have fun guests on that show. It's a lot of comedians we know and are friends with. And then, we had friggin' Bob Newhart on a few weeks ago. That was crazy. Wow. So, we have Chaz Palminteri was a couple weeks ago. So we have a fun time with all kinds of guests on that show. And otherwise, I do several podcasts myself, and one of those college friends of mine, this guy named John Daly, is a very funny television writer. And he and I do 2 podcasts together. Basically, we're just dudes watching shows that are geared, I would say, primarily for ladies. So we watch Sex and the Citiettes is one of the podcasts. The other is the Bridgerton Bros. Okay. So we watch those Sex and the Citiettes. We've completed the series, and now we're basically doing fill-in episodes until it kicks back up again. But if I was going to recommend any of the podcasts, I would probably recommend that one.
Okay. Awesome. And then where can people find you on social media?
On social media, it's at Kevin McCaff everywhere. That's, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at Kevin McCaff. And you can find link to my, I go there on any one of the things. You can find a link to my album, to the album's called Nice and Drunk. Those are 2 things I think I am. So those are, that album is out. And it's just at Kevin McCaff everywhere. Awesome. And you can find all the things.
All right. Well, I hope people can find you live. I know New York City's had a lot with the pandemic shut down.
Things are starting to open again. Awesome. Things are kind of everywhere too, but things are starting to come back.
Are you touring anytime soon?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of dates set up yet, but they're starting to fill in a little bit. So I think I'm going to be in Chicago in October, Pennsylvania in June, various one-offs, all sorts of places. I think I'm in Florida in November at some point, but
God bless you.
I'll figure it out.
With all that you do with the radio show, with the podcast and stand up and everything, do you have kids?
I do not. No, I don't.
Oh, that explains a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Do you have kids?
I have an 11-month-old, and she's a handful. Yeah, thanks. But with all that you do, it's really quite amazing that you do it all well.
Thanks, man.
And that's kind of the theme of this podcast is, everybody wants to just focus on one thing, like a niche, right? And and it's kind of like that old saying, right? Like jack of all trades, master of none.
That's me, I think.
Right. But I go against the grain on that. I think it's good to be well-rounded, right? And to not just put on shutters and blinders to anything that you're not interested in. You should know a little bit about everything. So, I try to bring a wide variety of guests onto this podcast. I think a lot of people are going to benefit from finding your comedy. So I appreciate you being on here, and you're welcome to come back anytime.
Well, thanks a lot, Steve. Thanks so much for having me. Fun hang.
All right.
And that'll do it for another episode of the Know It Some podcast. Thanks again to our guest, Kevin McCaffrey. I appreciate your time. Had a lot of fun with that interview. Just a really fun conversation, and always a good time talking to Kevin. Those of you who have left us a 5-star review on Apple's or iTunes, thank you so much. If you haven't done so already, please head on over and give us that 5-star ranking. Our listeners and subscribers really appreciate it because it enables us to continue to book these amazing and interesting guests. And it'll ensure great content going forward for the future of the podcast. A lot of stuff in the works. I'm really, really excited about it. I just can't reveal it just yet. Just a few more T's to cross and I's to dot, or however that saying goes. But just, keep an eye out for some news on our social media accounts. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok now. At Know It Some Pod. That's Know It Some Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And that's all I have for you. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.